Okay, round two. Good evening. It is 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, August 17th, 2021, and this regular meeting of the Sandpoint Planning and Zoning Commission is now called to order. For the record, I am Chairman Jason Welker, presiding in council chambers at City Hall, 1123 West Lake Street in Sandpoint, Idaho. Also present are Commissioners John Hastings, Tom Riggs, Slate Camp, Forrest Schuck, and Kate Huisman and Mo Dunkel are absent this evening. Before we proceed, I have an announcement. As stated on the agenda, the public hearing that had been scheduled for this evening to consider amendments to Title IX zoning has been postponed to September 7th, 2021. On or before this Friday, August 20, 2021, a revised draft ordinance and full staff report will be posted on the city website, which limits the scope of proposed changes based on public feedback received by city staff. The purpose of the proposed ordinance remains the same, enabling the public improvements, including significantly enhanced stormwater treatment, as envisioned in the adopted downtown waterfront concept included in the city's Parks and Recreation Master Plan. The deadline for written comment has been extended to September 3rd at 5 p.m. Written comments should be delivered to the city clerk here at City Hall or by email to cityclerk@sandpointidaho.gov. There will be no public comment taken on this issue this evening. Are there any other general announcements or reports from the commissioners or from staff?
Nope.
Staff?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. All right, next on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from the commission's last meeting. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from July 20th, 2021 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Forrest. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Great. Thank you. The motion passes and the minutes are approved. Okay, there's no old business on the agenda this evening, so we will move on to new business. That brings us to item number 6A, public hearing and decision on a subdivision preliminary approval. The final item on the agenda this evening is a public hearing and subsequent decision on city application PS 21-0001, which is a request for preliminary approval of a 21 lot subdivision on one parcel. That's parcel number RPS 0000107051A, totaling approximately 8.52 acres, bounded by private property to the north, private property to the west, East Mountain View Drive to the south, and North Boyer Avenue to the east. A notice advertising the public hearing on this matter was published in the Bonner Daily Bee, the city's newspaper of record, on July 27th, 2021. The order and procedure for the public hearing will be as follows. First, an explanation of the subject of the public hearing by city staff. Second, a presentation by the applicant. Please note that commissioners should address their questions to the applicant at this time. Third, opening of the public hearing, at which time the public may provide testimony. Questions should be asked of those testifying at that time. The order for those providing testimony will be as follows: A, in favor; B, neutral; and C, opposed. Fourth, the applicant's rebuttal testimony, at which time final questions may be asked of the applicant. Please note that if new facts are elicited during rebuttal, the public will be given an opportunity to comment on any new facts. 5, we will close the public hearing. And 6, commissioners will deliberate. No new information may be provided after the hearing has been closed, with questions directed only to city staff during deliberation. Before we proceed any further, I would like to ask for confirmation from each commissioner, please, that you have had no ex parte contact or conflict of interest as pertains to this request. Forrest?
I have
Tom? None for myself. John?
None.
Slate?
No.
Okay. That's great. We will now hear from city staff, who will introduce this application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, I'm Darren Fluke, your interim city planner, and I'll be your cruise director for going through this staff report and application this evening. I'm going to share my screen quickly here. Mr. Chairman, can you confirm that you can see the screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So as was stated, you're here this evening to hear an application for a preliminary plat for Boyer, well, I should say Boyer Meadows subdivision. How embarrassing that I didn't get that changed. I apologize. And you're seeing that the application is located here, as was stated, at the northwest corner of Mountain View and Boyer, which is just east of the Sandpoint Airport. I know the commission has seen this diagram before, but it bears repeating. The application tonight should fall within the middle of this Venn diagram. That is, that it complies with the comprehensive plan, it complies with the urban area transportation plan, as well as the zoning and subdivision ordinances. I know you're well familiar with that process. As you are with this, again, we are here at the preliminary plat stage. We're just looking for compliance tonight with the zoning ordinance, subdivision ordinance, and related plans. And once and if the commission determines that that is the case and gives this application an approval, it will be forwarded to the city council with your recommendation. And the city council, as the elected body, will make the final decision. If it's approved, then the applicant is allowed to go and build the plat as shown this evening. And once that's done, then they can come back for a final plat and begin to sell lots. So the application tonight does consist of 20 buildable single-family dwelling lots plus a large industrial lot on an 8.5 acre parcel. The lot sizes range from 6,700 square feet to 8,200 square feet approximately for the buildable lots, which does comply with the base zoning for the designation, the base zoning designation, that is. The other lot is about 2.4 acres, and it exists here on the west side of the single family project, and it is zoned industrial. With regard to the comprehensive plan, you can see the site outlined here on this slide. It does have a mixed land use designation. The bulk of the site, approximately 3/4 of the site, is designated as industrial. That is the designation that is given by the comprehensive plan and described here on the left. The comprehensive plan doesn't give us a lot of information regarding industrially designated land, but it does rather speak for itself that it is for industrial purposes. The context area 4 is in the southeast quadrant of the property, and C4, CA4 designated land is generally for higher density residential and services that serve that residential land use. The zoning on the site is again a split zoning designation, and this slide is detailed for you. You see the eastern half of the site is designated as RLS, that's the residential single family, and the west half of the site is designated as industrial technical park, that's the ITP zoning, and it is meant to accommodate lighter industrial type land uses. The red slash that you see cutting through the property from the southwest to the northeast there is the lateral safety zone for the airport. And that does require that lots impacted by that are noted with a fair disclosure statement. And I'll talk about more about that in a second. So this is what the plat looks like as submitted by the applicant. You'll see that all of the lots are proposed to be served by a local road, which is a dead-end cul-de-sac going from north to south there, extending off Mountain View Road to the south and dead-ending up at the property to the north. I think you all probably noted in your staff report what was noted about this road. Generally, the comprehensive plan would not support a cul-de-sac or dead-end type road. However, in this situation, we did feel that it was appropriate and warranted by the site conditions that exist. Specifically, there's not a lot of roads to connect to the property. Secondly, a connection to Boyer Road would really simply, or Boyer Avenue, excuse me, would just simply function to impede the safe operation of that roadway. Given where the other connections are to the road and where this road would connect in, it didn't seem to make a lot of sense to require that connection. Furthermore, the comp plan and the zoning ordinance would both support a stub street connection to the property to the north. However, that property is also designated ITP, and it was our feeling that that it therefore did not make a lot of sense to bring industrial or commercial type traffic within the boundaries of this project. And so that's why the conditions of approval do not require a stub street location here on the north. Finally, you'll see that this plat does not show any pedestrian or non-motorized connection to Boyer Avenue here to the east. We did include that in as a condition of approval, and that is at the discretion of the commission to require that. It would be in compliance with the comprehensive plan. And we did recommend that that connection be in the vicinity of lots 5 and 6 here on the east side of the project. But again, that's at the discretion of the commission. And so when you make your motion, I would hope that you would specifically note that we are including that condition or not, if you choose to go in that direction. At least I didn't have a lot more for you this evening as far as remarks go. I did want to note, however, one thing, we had a late arriving submittal testimony from the Timberline helicopter operation, which owns this property here to the west of the proposed development. They did raise some concerns with the operation of their aircraft in proximity to the project here. And one of the things that we could do, the way the condition is written right now, is that only the lots that were impacted up here in the northwest corner of the single family portion of the project would be noted on the plat as impacted by this lateral safety zone. However, it would certainly be at the commission's discretion, and I would advise that you add or expand on that condition to merely note on the final plat that all of the lots within this project may be subject to impact by the operations of the particular land uses that go on in and around the airport. That was an oversight on my part, and the condition should have been written a little more expansively. Finally, Mr. Chairman, you did go over this for the commission. Tonight, you'll hear from the applicant. You'll take public testimony. You'll allow the applicant an opportunity to respond, and then bring it back to the commission for deliberation. And finally, not a decision, but a recommendation to the city council. I think I'll leave it on this slide for reference. And if the commission had questions, I'd be happy to entertain those now.
Thank you, Darren. Are there questions from the commissioners for Darren? Tom?
Yeah, Darren, would there's no connection required at the north end of the cul-de-sac, but would there be a utility in requiring at least some sort of emergency access for fire trucks and safety services and the like? That's a pretty long cul-de-sac that we're dead ended at.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, that's a fair question, and I would leave that to your discretion. The fire marshal did not flag that as a concern. The length of the road is within tolerance, or it is in compliance with what's required by the code as far as the maximum length of a dead-end street. And so if the commission had that concern, you certainly could require that a stub street connection be left to the property to the north. It's always a little bit difficult when we don't know how that property will redevelop. But in general, there would be no harm in requiring that road stub to the property in case of a future connection was warranted or necessary.
Go ahead, Tom.
I have another question too, I think a bit more substantive. It seems like too often development projects come to us that are not consistent with the comprehensive plan, and we tend to gloss over. I mean, this is not consistent with the comp plan. Is there some reason that at some point in the development process, whether it be a rezoning, which we're already past here, or even at the subdivision stage, that we couldn't require a concurrent amendment to the comp plan?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, that's a fair question, and it is an issue that we struggled with a bit as we put this staff report together. In a nutshell, this property was the subject of a rezone request back in 2019. The commission, as you will probably remember, recommended denial to the council of that zone change request. The council did find that it was in compliance with the comp plan and changed the zoning designation from ITP to the RS, the residential single family. In my opinion, and this is not meant as a criticism, it's just merely an academic exercise at this point. In my opinion, at the time of the zone change, it would have been more appropriate to entertain a change to the comprehensive plan amendment or a comprehensive plan future land use map at the same time, and having that acted upon prior to the zone change. That didn't happen in this case. And so at this point, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner, I'm not sure that it would serve much public purpose to require the applicant to go back and amend the comprehensive plan future land use map because the zoning has already been put in place, and that does vest the landowners with certain property rights.
Thank you.
Forrest, you had a question?
Darren, hi, Forrest Shook here. Has anybody contacted the airport or the FAA about the possibility of recommending this development with Lot 1, Block 2 being partly inside the airport lateral safety zone? Any implications there? The FAA is notoriously picky about those lines. We've been down that road.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, we did transmit to both of those agencies. We've not received a formal response from either agency at this time. I would note that staff did take a look at that, and we were not concerned as far as the restrictions on height, given that the line does just barely bisect the back of the lot that does fall within the setback, the rear setback. And so we'll not have any structures within that area. It's primarily an issue, in my view, of making sure that people who buy these lots in the future understand that the privacy of the operation of the airport.
Thank you.
Darren, I'll ask you a question if you don't mind. You briefly mentioned in your report the undesirability of having a connection to Boyer on the north end of this development. Given that, in city code, we call for block lengths of 600 feet or less, between 300 and 600 feet, and that the north end of this development is, I believe, around 580 feet from East Mountain View. Can you elaborate why it would not be desirable to have an L-shaped road as opposed to a cul-de-sac here that enabled residents to enter and exit the development from two places, one on East Mountain View on the south end and one from North Boyer on the north end?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. Let me share a separate screen with you here. I want to go to the GIS system if I'm able, because it may illustrate this point a little more readily. Are we seeing the GIS, the map there?
Yes.
Okay. And so with regard to the property in question is this property here, which just was outlined. The residential portion of the property is on the east half here. The CA portion is down here in the corner. This would be Mountain View and of course Boyer intersection right here. And so what we have here is a required offset from this intersection, minimum offset of 250 feet to the north, which would put us up in this area. We also have a required offset from this intersection here on the north of Jupiter Drive of 250 feet, which gets us down in this vicinity. There's also minimum offsets required from existing driveways, which would be 150 feet off this driveway and 150 feet off of this driveway here. Fortunately, we don't have any driveways off of the project that was built here to the east on Shady Oak Lane there. So the reason I show you this is just to show you that it becomes problematic with regard to geometry to fit another roadway in there. And the proposed intersection offset here on Mountain View does comply with the minimum of the code from Boyer Avenue. And it was thought that with only 20 lots that we were dealing with, that the operation of Boyer was best preserved or conserved, if you will, by having this existing intersection serve as the primary access for the future lots. And 20 lots is not a lot, and to spread the traffic out along this arterial roadway in 2 places was felt to be less desirable, especially not knowing with what was going to go in this property here that is zoned and designated for industrial land uses.
So are you saying it's actually impossible from the perspective of the 150-foot requirement from the driveway on the property to the north? Would that be within the 150 feet from a potential road coming into this development? Because that seems like that driveway on the property immediately north would be the only one that might be within the 150 feet of an exit from this development. Dan?
Nice step in
Sure,
here.
go ahead.
On a minor arterial,
Mhm.
which North Boyer is classified as a minor arterial, the intersection spacing is actually 500 feet, not 250. And I think that makes a distinction here between Juniper and East Mountain View is, I believe, around 900 feet total. So it is physically impossible to have a driveway to the west and be 500 feet from both Juniper and East Mountain View.
So it's Juniper.
All of that. You would need more than 1,000 feet separating those two to be able to be 500 feet between.
I see. Okay, that makes more sense than the 150 feet from driveway to driveway that Darren explained. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think the point is we're, in general, we're trying to just limit the number of accesses to the arterial roadways as much as possible to preserve their function.
I do get that. I also understand that the comp plan explicitly calls out the undesirability of cul-de-sacs. So once again, we're in this kind of conflict between the urban area transportation plan and the comp plan, which lays out a particular vision for this sort of development versus the urban area transportation plan, which has some realities that make the kinds of developments our comp plan calls for impossible. I did have another question about some wording in your staff report. Let me find it really quick. Okay, it's on the section on double frontage lots. Under your staff analysis, you did mention, I'm going to read it here. At a minimum, direct lot access to North Boyer and East Mountain View Drive should and will be prohibited by the conditions of approval, and the commission should consider requiring, and here's the question I had, requiring the creation of a common lot and or screening in the form of landscaping and or fencing. So I'm not familiar with the term common lot. Can you explain what that means? And that also leads me to one of the recommended conditions actually calls for non-vinyl fencing. So what is meant by common lot and or screening in the form of landscaping and or fencing? Could you elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Yes, thanks for the question, Mr. Chairman. Double frontage lots are just simply exactly what the term says, lots that have frontage on 2 separate public right-of-ways. And that would be the case the way this lot, this project is drawn. What you can do when I'm saying a common lot is put a landscaping lot in there of some width, say, let's just say 10 feet for the purposes of discussion. That is, that runs the full length of the project behind all of the lots that would be double fronted, and is a lot that is owned by the HOA and contains the landscaping, which could mean a berm, it could mean a fence. Previous applications in my time with the city have with similar type frontages have a non-vinyl fence, and so that's the way I wrote the condition. but I did want to flag it for the commission that you have the opportunity to do something more or less substantial than the fencing. I did also include a condition of approval that prohibits direct lot or parcel access to Boyer, which just means that any of those lots that back up to Boyer would not be allowed to put a driveway or an approach onto Boyer.
Sure, that's understood. But you are implying that some solution other than fencing is open for discussion in terms of possibly a landscaped buffer between the backs of those lots and Boyer.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that that's at the discretion of the commission, yes. And you would need to make the finding that better complies with the provisions of the comp plan and the zoning.
Thank you. Other questions for Darren?
I have a question about the city's position on the increase in traffic on Mountain View and Boyer. When you consider the development across the street, I know that we went through some of the detail. I do not remember it, but I'm curious as to what you might have for an opinion on that.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask Dan Tadek to weigh in on that question.
Yeah.
And it may be that we need you to be just a bit more specific on the question.
I can address that. A trip generation distribution letter was completed for this particular development. And the threshold for a more detailed transportation study is 50 AM or PM peak hour trips or 300 daily trips. And this development fell short of both of those thresholds. So a more detailed analysis is not required by code. That being said, the development to the west, lot 1, block 3, if I'm reading that correctly, we would, when that lot is developed, we would need to look at these developments cumulatively to ensure that the overall impacts from this project, this property is not now triggering the need for the transportation study. So this project in and of itself is not going to create any issues. We already looked at the University Place, and that project there is mitigation associated with particularly the intersection of Baldy and Boyer with that project. So those impacts are already addressed. So I don't see any cumulative impacts that are substantial from this one and on top of that one.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Darren or Dan? No. Okay. All right, no more questions from commission. So next will be the applicant's presentation. As a reminder, commissioners should address their questions to the applicant. Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, commissioners. Good evening tonight in your awesome new city council chambers. Pretty cool. Just going to share my screen here. There we go. Thanks again for your time tonight. My name is Jeremy Grimm, owner of Whiskey Rock Planning and Consulting, here to help Mr. Cliff Mort through the subdivision process, preliminary plat money. For those who aren't aware, I was involved in the planning and development of the comp plan as the planning director in Sandpoint from 2007 to 2015, and appreciate a lot of the comments and questions you guys asked tonight. Those are great. Tonight, I just want to walk through in a little more detail some of the nuances of what's before you, and in general, want to commend staff on going over the application and the staff report. We are in general agreement with most all of it. So moving on, I think you're quite aware the site. It's about 8.5 acres on the west side of North Boyer. It's a split zone site. the land uses in the vicinity. It's tucked up against some industrial general and some industrial technology park. But to the east and southeast, and probably to the south eventually, there's certainly a much greater share of residential single-family development in the region. As I mentioned, it is split zoned, and that's why this development's been laid out this way, to utilize the residential single-family zone parcel on the eastern portion of the lot, about 4.26 acres, and the applicant doesn't have any immediate plans for that western portion, the 4.26 acres. In total, we're looking at 21 lots, 20 residential single-family lots. These lots range in size, but average are about 6,900 square feet. You'll probably recognize that that's about almost 40% larger than the minimum lot size in the residential single-family zone. Mr. Mort has been doing this sort of housing development and construction for a long time. He frankly has a lot more experience at this than even I do, and I'll introduce him in a moment to talk about his experience. This site he purchased relatively recently, aware of the extreme housing constraint and the challenges of access to housing in Greater Sandpoint, and thought that this site would be a really ideal site, not only because of its centralized location, but also because it is adjacent to one of the most robust multimodal pathways in the community. There are not a lot of other sites in this area that give you access north on the Boyer pathway to recreational opportunities, east to Pend Oreille over Popsicle Bridge, or south to services and to the downtown center. And I just want to point out it's fairly similar to Moon Ridge Estates and some other developments that are in the vicinity across Boyer Avenue. At this point, before jumping back in, I just want to take a moment to introduce Cliff Mort. Cliff is from the region, was born and raised in the region. In fact, his I think I have this right, his great grandmother was born in like a fire station, fire lookout tower. So, no, the Grange Hall in Clark Fork. So Cliff is from this area, knows this area. He's going to talk to you briefly about sort of who he is, some of the solutions they provide to housing in the region, and certainly some of the challenges that he faces. Then I'm just going to jump back in and talk about a couple of the other components of the staff report. So, and then we'll entertain any questions that you have.
Thanks, Jeremy. Mr. Chairman and fellow commissioners, I'm Cliff Mort. I reside at 1950 West Bellerive Lane in Coeur d'Alene. I grew up in the area down there, and obviously have been in and out of Sandpoint since my childhood. I own a company called Monogram Homes. We have various development companies as well. We've done that since 1985. Been in the business for 38 plus years now, and have developed thousands and thousands and thousands of lots in the region, and then also in about 6 other states. We have a division in Tri-Cities. We also have quite a bit of our operation still is in Coeur d'Alene. Our main office is in Riverstone down there, and we develop in all of the communities in Kootenai County. But we had been looking at Sandpoint for a lot of years, had been requested or asked to come up here numerous times, and could never really find the right entry point into Sandpoint. And land is constrained. I mean, it's certainly stringent up here as far as the mountains and waterways and so forth. And so we finally were able to find some properties about 5 years ago, and we entered in out by the airport and built some homes out there, Sand Creek and some of that area. And then we also bought some property out at Pend Oreille and worked through about 50 some lots out there in a subdivision out that way. And then we also, Whiskey Jack was another area that we built some homes out there, and we have some current developments underway there as well. But in the city of Sandpoint, we've tried for 5 years to find other properties where we've been in and out of contract several times. This one we've actually worked on for a couple of years and finally went into contract on that. just been real difficult to try to create what I would say, moderate housing. It's not all, the cheapest housing in the area, but certainly we try to do an entry point, workforce housing. We've built homes up into the multi-million range, but in this particular area, trying to back into what the need is in the community and really looking at what, the locals would need and ultimately use, trying to create that and working within the guise of the current, ordinances and requirements in the city. And I know, we've had conversations with staff for about 4 or 5 years about, some of the difficulties. I think a lot of those codes and requirements were designed around some of the older neighborhoods of Sandpoint. And what's happened as you look at some of this, we put some, I had Jeremy put some photos of a current subdivision that we're building in out at Ponderay. And just as an example, where I was going with some of the requirements in Sandpoint, the requirement of a home, you can't build the home any narrower than what the width of your garage is. So if you're building a standard two-car garage, if it's 20 feet wide, your home has to be 40 feet wide. And then your home also has to extend out and be even with the front of the garage or protrude forward. Well, in a lot of aspects, that really forces you, when you get to narrow lots, to really build just one specific product type. You're really limited in what you're doing. And that's why some of the neighborhoods you've seen maybe as of late that have narrow lots, they really don't have a lot of character to them in Sandpoint, unless they're in the older part of town. But where I was going with that is just to show you, because I was asked by your honorable mayor to be part of a task force of affordable housing. And one of the points I brought up is just some changes in some of your ordinances could really help with that. This couple of housing types that Jeremy just went through, that's a streetscape that the bulk of those homes you cannot build in Sandpoint, even though they're correct in width. Either one of those that you see right there would not fit on your lots, because the house doesn't, the one on the left, single family house, the house portion does not protrude out in front of the garage, and the house portion is narrower than the garage. That is a 20-foot wide garage. In a lot of cases these days, everybody likes 22 or 24-foot wide garage. If they're having a 2-car garage, they got a little extra storage. And so your width of your lots, if you're doing a 50 or a 55, you notice I did 55 in this particular development. It's because of those things. But I think as time goes on, I would ask the commission to take a look at that as they, maybe work with mayor and council on some of those ordinances, that I think that really would help your community. Having worked in 22 different jurisdictions in 6 different states, it's probably the most cumbersome part of your ordinance is that portion. And I think it really does affect your affordability. And I think it affects your creativity in housing here in Sandpoint. Here tonight, I know Jeremy's got a few other things to go through. Certainly we want to, this particular neighborhood, again, part of it residential, part of it was industrial. It was before you before. We actually had it purchased at that point under a contract that it was going to actually get built for us. That never happened. We ultimately bought the property. We're not sure what we're going to do with the industrial side of it. We understand the impacts there. We're also, in agreement that we would actually place a requirement on the plat that, is a part of that states that, people acknowledge that they're buying in an airport zone. I've been a private pilot for 20 plus years. I'd much rather hear an airplane go by than that train at 2 in the morning. So, we are in Sandpoint, but I think with this one, having that on the face of the plat and something that they acknowledged when they purchased, I think that's a great thing. Other than that, I think it's fairly straightforward. Certainly the secondary access to Boyer, I think that's a real negative. People buy in, I hear ordinance saying no cul-de-sacs, but people love cul-de-sacs. I mean, communities, we've built, lots and lots and lots of them. And your most premium lots are always your cul-de-sac lots. Families love them. People congregate in them. all of those types of things. The one other thing, and I think Jeremy will address it as well, is connectivity as far as trail, right in the middle of your neighborhood. When you have a cul-de-sac, people buy it because it's secure. They have their neighbors, they have their neighborhood, it's all fenced, they like that. It's not that far to walk out and around. To suggest an additional walkway through the middle of the neighborhood, I think it's real negative. It's negative to the families. It's, if you have young kids and so forth, it's just one more additional access out of your neighborhood. I understand the hope that, people would walk and bike and it's all family friendly, but that's not always the case. And Boyer is going to be a pretty highly traveled road. So I think, I would like to see it not force us to do that. Additionally, when you're talking affordability, it's just one more thing. It's not that it'd kill the project. It's just that, everything adds up in these and the way that we typically try to price things. It's not that we try to go for maximum dollar. We try to do volume and create pricing that works. So anyway, I'd ask you to take a look at that. But with that, I'm going to let Jeremy talk about the balance. And if you have any questions for me when we're done, I'll certainly be open to that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Cliff. I think that was a pretty good summary. As Cliff was mentioning, there are a lot of costs, and each one of these adds a layer onto the cost of a home purchase, and home sale. From the get-go. We don't have any enduring tools before us right now. Both Cliff and I are on the Affordable Housing Task Force the mayor's put together. But as he mentioned, his intent is to bring these to market at a set, margin that he brings factors into his pro formas, and hopefully get some homes on the market in Sandpoint. Wanted to speak to you briefly about this, and I actually was planning director when that comp plan and that zoning was developed. I participated in a lot of that language. One of the things that it was included for was there are some types of cul-de-sacs that I would call, destructive or certainly not cohesive for neighborhoods. This is just a casual example of one where, people in these two homes can talk through their back fence, but if you actually want to go drop off, a person or something, you have to, go this long walk around. And that's sort of the gist and the intent of that, connectivity portion in the code when it talks about, in the comp plan, when it talks about connectivity. In this case, I mean, you look at a 500-foot long, roadway, there's really no, barrier to someone just simply walking down a very slow, speed road here to get out to where they're going on the multimodal path. And to Cliff's point, a lot of the clients he sees and people he in the neighborhoods he interacts with, there is that sense of security. I know I have little kids. I live on a cul-de-sac. I find it quite actually peaceful and nice. You don't have a lot of cut through traffic. So I guess we understand you're balancing a lot, but in this case, we just feel that if you could, consider this connectivity aspect in the context of where this proposed subdivision lays in the city, and the potential cut through traffic that's going to happen through there, and really what does it serve in terms of, does it avoid this sort of that intent of that language if you have some really large subdivisions coming forward. I want to speak quickly to the lateral safety zone. Staff covered it very well, but certainly there are dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of homes within the lateral safety zone. So we don't expect this to encumber the lateral safety zone at all, especially since it's in the rear setback of the one lot. And moving on, many of the plats in and around the airport, such as Grandview Estates, include this sort of language that says, close proximity to the runway and expectation of increased air traffic. You may encounter substantial noise, vibration, fumes, dust, fuel particles, and other effects as planes depart and land from the airport. So I think anyone being out there for more than a couple minutes would recognize there's an airport right next door to them. And we're certainly agreeable to including this type of language on the face of the plat. So in closing, I'd certainly follow up on any of the questions you folks asked staff, but at this point would entertain any questions. We feel that as proposed, the preliminary plat meets the standards of the code, tries its best to balance those competing demands of the urban area transportation plan with the comp plan, and most importantly, hopes to bring some inventory online so we can start to hopefully address some of these affordable housing challenges that the community faces. So thanks, and any questions you have.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Cliff. Any questions from the commissioners?
No.
I was going to ask a question, but I think Cliff addressed it. And the question I was going to ask was, Jeremy, you highlighted that the average lot size in this development is 40% larger than the minimum required by code. I was going to ask, why not put more lots in this subdivision and build more houses, which would further increase supply and help solve this affordable housing crisis? And I understand from Cliff's response that smaller lots wouldn't fit your model of development in which the two-car garage is prominent. My question for you is, have you done any developments in any of the communities, the thousands of homes you've built that aren't two-car garage, kind of the type of home that you showed us pictures of? Have you thought of developing in a way that meets kind of the vision that Sandpoint's ordinances lay out for the aesthetic of what new developments could look like in Sandpoint?
Just to address that, thanks for your question. Yes, we have. And we've done a lot of alley loaded neighborhoods. We've done, cluster housing. We've done literally many types of housing, and both, single family and multifamily, detached multifamily, where we've actually went in and rather than subdivided like this, taken a multifamily piece and created clusters of housing. And I think, those types of things, it works out really well. But when you're limited by, your garage side of things, and I just have to tell you, especially in this climate, anything that I've seen in the north, and certainly we do housing in the Tri-Cities and even down there, in most cases, most families want a two-car garage if they're buying housing. Now, if you're doing rentals, even a lot of the rentals that we have now have two-car garages. They might be smaller, but going down to those small lots, I mean, yes, we could go down to a 50 by 100 lot or something like that. But really, when you're looking to try to create that additional, this particular property, the size of the property kind of limits it for some of that. And hopefully we'll have some other parcels where we'll be able to get a little more creative with some of that housing. In fact, Jeremy and I were looking at some of it earlier. We were talking about that, the whole missing middle that everybody talks about, and how do you create that? We have a lot of neighborhoods where we're doing duplex or even the detached, where we are creating that. And so with that, I'd say yes. In this one, I think it's pretty tough with your current ordinance. So that's why the lot size.
Yeah. Follow up. We recently amended Title IX to allow for ADUs up to 900 square feet. I think the intent behind that amendment was to incentivize people to build ADUs that could be used as housing, not just as vacation rentals, as most ADUs currently are. I know this development would allow for ADUs, but looking at the pictures you showed, I don't see any realistic way that anybody could actually put an ADU on the property here. Is there no way to put in a development that would allow for potential increased density in the future through the addition of ADUs?
We looked at that really hard in this, but when you're talking about narrow lots and two-car garages and creating ADUs as a part of that, and we do have neighborhoods where we have ADUs in them, and currently even some that we are building, we have ADUs. And this one, it was just real difficult to try to figure out how to get into that rear yard. And then when you're talking ADUs, unless you have alley loaded product, a lot of times it's more expensive construction because your driveways are longer, you're detaching houses, your construction with an ADU. A lot of times, if it has to be two-story, you're creating more cost in that second story over garage. I mean, everybody thinks that's affordable space. It's not real affordable space if you're really looking at the cost per foot. So that's why some of the why we're trying to do what we're doing. So
Yeah, I understand.
I do commend the commission for the ADU side. I mean, that really is a help, I believe, in your local housing
Yeah,
price.
and I would just respond, of course, there's additional cost, but for a potential buyer to have that rentable space, that 900 square feet could earn you $1,800 a month in income right now. And I would also point out that one block from my house, there's in South Sandpoint, where 2-car garages are exceedingly rare. There's 2 houses, one with a 1-car garage, one with no garage, on the market for $900,000 and $1 million right now, 1,800 square feet each.
Yeah.
So there is plenty of demand for houses in this town that don't have 2-car garages. I know that that's what the new developments are all kind of doing. So that seems like what new developments need to do. But, if future opportunities arise from a developer standpoint for developments that maybe do fit what our ordinances describe, 1-car garage with a potential for an ADU in the back, I think there's a huge market for that here.
Yeah. I think you need to also look at the total number of sales that have occurred and what price points. I think that also is, I mean, we try to back into those numbers based upon who we see the buyers could be or would be. And, in most cases, the medium price points, and, that's something that we've been talking about and addressing at this Affordable Housing Committee as well, is just kind of talking about, okay, who are these buyers, and who ultimately, what are we trying to create in affordability, and really what price point would that be? What could they buy? Because I don't know that there's a whole lot of wage earners that can afford a $900,000 house in
Definitely not.
Sandpoint. So,
But if there were 300 more of them, it would help, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Jeremy mentioned your margins. I'm not going to ask you what your margins are, but are these, just for the record, are these market priced houses? Is there any intent to make this actual workforce housing by the definition of workforce housing, or is that just a term that Jeremy used from a, there is an official definition of workforce housing as far as average monthly income and indexing prices to AMI. I'm assuming this is not workforce housing. This is market priced housing. Is that correct?
I think that's a mix of terms a little bit, because it's always a misnomer to talk about workforce housing. It's who's workforce. And, I think you can go to medians and some of those things. And I think, currently the median somewhere in that 60-some thousand a year range. But really that's a 2-income family, probably actually 4 parties in the household. But in most cases, somebody that, even today, I mean, if you're talking affordable housing, really in most of our neighborhoods, I don't think we have anything that's under 400,000 these days. However, when you look at mortgages at, 3%, that's still putting you under 2,000 a month for a mortgage, around 1,800, maybe even a little less. And so really it comes to be the down payment and so forth. And so that's another part of what we try to do is really look at who those buyers would be. But I would think that, having housing in that 400 to 500 range certainly is something that does fit a lot of the workers in Sandpoint. So, I mean, I as it relates to workforce housing, I think you have to define who that worker is. So
Certainly.
Mr. Chairman, it'd be interesting to understand your perspective with your background in economics on the elasticity of the housing market here. What happens when you add 20 or 30 homes to the market? Because clearly one of the drivers of the current pricing is the lack of housing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why my questions about density. I mean, I know you almost made it sound like it was a feature of this development that the lot sizes are 40% larger than they need to be. I view that as almost a downside of this development, because I feel like we could fit 40% more homes on here. And then if we built them in a way that allowed for ADUs, you could include this on 4.5 acres in Sandpoint, you could probably provide at least double what this development is. So that addresses the elasticity problem to an extent. But I also understand that the model of development that Cliff is bringing is not necessarily what I've described in that observation. So I'll talk elasticity with you after the meeting if you want that. Are there any other questions from commissioners? Okay. Thank you,
appreciate your
Cliff.
comments.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, we will now prepare to proceed with the public hearing. Please note, for the record, any written comments submitted prior to the agenda posting was included with the meeting packet. Any written comment received after agenda posting but prior to the meeting was forwarded and provided to the commissioners. We appreciate all the written comments we received. The public hearing is for comments only. Do not address any questions to the commissioners or to city staff. If commissioners have questions for the person testifying, they should ask those questions at the time of their testimony. For those in attendance here in chambers this evening, if you would like to speak, you will need to complete a sign-up form available on the table by the door and hand it to the city clerk. Please state on your form whether you wish to speak in favor, are neutral, or are in opposition to the application. Do not approach the dais. If you have any written materials for the commissioners, please hand those to the city clerk. If there is anybody participating on Zoom, please note that you will need a working microphone on your computer or on your phone or computer to speak. When your name is called, you will see a prompt on your screen asking whether you would like to unmute. Then you will need to unmute yourself in order to be heard. The clerk will now lower all hands on Zoom in order to take testimony in the order previously stated. If you wish to speak in favor, are neutral, or are in opposition, I will make a call for each of you. Then you may raise your hand at that time. Each speaker will be allowed 3 minutes. Okay, the public hearing is now open. Is there anybody on Zoom or in the chambers who would like to testify in favor of this project? Anybody on Zoom, Melissa?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Is there anybody who would like to testify who is neutral? Okay. Nobody on Zoom? Is there anybody who would like to testify who is opposed? That was easy. Nobody on Zoom? Oh, did we have somebody? Yeah. Do you mind coming up to the dais and introducing yourself, please?
My name is Brian Jorgensen, and I'm the president and CEO of Timberline Helicopters. We were the ones, I think, that submitted the only against. And the big issue for us is we are planning to build a fairly substantial facility there. We refurbish ex-military helicopters. They're large, they're noisy. We try to do our best to be neighborly, and we train every spring for about 4 days in the spring. We're flying around, and you would not believe the amount of complaints and issues. And it's not just us that gets the issue. It's the airport manager. It's the folks at Granite Aviation that are having to deal with sometimes pretty irate people. And so for us to have this kind of density that close to where we're going to be, I think that having something on the plat is a good start. But if you look at the history of airports and people moving in close to them, people move in, they like their peace and quiet. They want the airplanes to go away, and they just create an incredible problem. I mean, you can look at many Southern California airports that fight, daily for their survival, and some that are no longer in existence. And the airport is an important part of our community, and we are a fairly large employer here, and we need to be able to operate. So that's our issue with the development.
Did you say you trained for 4 days in the spring?
Yeah, we bring all our pilots in, and we'll, we have FAA check rides that we have to do and company training and stuff. So we have them here for 4 to 6 days in the spring. And like I said, we do our best to not fly early and not fly late and go in different directions and stuff. And it's every year, it gets worse and worse and worse every year.
What are your operations like the rest of the year?
Almost nothing. Aircraft comes in for maintenance and goes away. But as we grow, that's going to change. We're going to be here more and more, not less and less. So we currently employ 25 people in the local area and over 100 around the country. And we provide heavy lift firefighting and construction support actually around the world. So like I said, we're not getting smaller. It's going to become more and more of an issue, I fear, as time goes by.
Mm-hmm. Are there any questions for Brian Forrest?
Brian Forshuk, can you guess at what the timeline might be for your operation on that part of the airport?
So we were hoping to break ground this fall, just due to the fact that the fire season's been crazy and we haven't had people to dedicate to it. It's not going to happen, but next spring we should be breaking ground.
Good.
Is that the property immediately west of the western side of this?
No, there's a small 4 acre block between, but it's what, 300, 400 feet wide. So, and like I said, we try to operate neighborly, but sometimes if a fire call comes in and we have to be out there running an aircraft till 10 or 11 o'clock at night, we have to be out there for a fire call in the morning.
Mhm.
So.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
there is someone on Zoom who would like to speak in opposition.
Okay, please have them, or if you can hear me, please introduce yourself and share your thoughts.
Yes, hello. Hopefully everybody can hear me. My name is Hank Miller. I also represent Timberline Helicopters and really wanted to expand on a couple of things that Brian said. I function as the Executive VP and General Counsel for Timberline Helicopters. And what Brian said about flying neighborly is something we all try to do in the aviation community. But the reality is even that we do training once a year and try to minimize the impact, we are a maintenance, repair, and overhaul facility that does repair Black Hawk helicopters. We do those repairs. It requires run-ups. It requires test flights. We do have crews coming and going. We do dispatch aircraft out for fires on a global basis. But we also, again, we look at our neighbors on the airport and the other aviation kind of noises or nuisances that you will hear. And just so it's noted, and I think everybody should maybe take some time, the Black Hawk can put out 105 to 140 decibels of noise. The average biz jet puts out 140, and the biz jet community is growing at Sandpoint. The average airplane or helicopter, like the Life Flight helicopter that operates 24/7 out of that airport, is anywhere from 85 to 90 decibels. The average lawnmower, to give you an idea, is somewhere between 85 and 90 decibels. So imagine in the middle of the night at 500 feet above your house, it sounds like a lawnmower is flying over. So I think that maybe something more than simply a disclaimer at the bottom that says, oh, by the way, you may be near an airport. And the reason I say that is the reality is, as Brian alluded to, airports get shut down all the time and rezoned all the time because people move to an area. And when they move to an area, they don't think about the noise until it starts to bother them at night. Their blood pressure goes up. They start to complain. And quite honestly, people spending $500,000 on a house do not want their peace and quiet disturbed and will complain. And it will become a problem for not only this commission, but for the city council as well, almost inevitable that it will. So I only offer that up as just a couple of caveats around the noise, but there are studies linked to increased blood pressure, cardiovascular disease with increased noise. There's particulate matter concerns of being that close to an airport. This community will be, while it's outside of the red line, will be directly under the flight path at times for this airport. Helicopters typically fly against, or away the flow between traffic. Between traffic follows left-hand turns at this airport, right? So that means they will be directly under the flight path of all aircraft coming and going, depending on which way the wind's blowing. That's really all I had, so I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Hank. Are there any questions for Hank Miller? Okay. Are there any more members of the public who would like to testify on Zoom?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Before the public hearing is closed, would the applicant care to offer any rebuttal testimony? Just a reminder that if any new facts are elicited during rebuttal, the public must be given an opportunity to comment on any new facts. Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeremy Grimm, Whiskey Rock Planning. Just a couple of things, the proposed subdivision meets the standard of the zone. We're not asking for any special, tweaks or changes. So the residential zoning of the property, property owner has effectively entitlement to proceed with a residential subdivision. In terms of noise from helicopter operations, I don't know what the decibels of a jet airplane are. Tamarack takes off there. I did just look up the decibels of a train horn, which are 140 to 150 decibels, which seems quite more significant than the 85 that was quoted there. It's Sandpoint. It's not a quiet place, that's for sure. Maybe the subdivision will attract airplane aficionados. I know I love aviation, and I think what they do at Timberline is amazing. And I love it when I see planes fly over. Maybe people who like planes. I know there's a guy who has the railroad stuff all over his house next to the railroad crossing over in Sagal. So maybe it'll attract some people like that. But our point is that it's zone residential single family. That's what we're trying to do here. And we believe that by putting that language on the face of the plat. Everyone who buys in this subdivision will fully understand the implications of having an airport next door. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, the public hearing is now closed. At this time, the commission will deliberate. No new information may be provided and questions may be directed only to city staff during deliberation. The staff report includes suggested motions. So if anybody's ready to put forward a motion, we ask that you refer to the language in the staff report when doing so. So let's open this up for deliberation. Tom?
I have a question.
Sure.
If I may, I'd like to ask a question of legal counsel. There have been several references here tonight that there's an entitlement to develop in accordance with the zoning. Is there a legal development entitlement simply by virtue of the zoning ordinance having been adopted?
They have a right to move forward with a preliminary application that is consistent with code as well as the comprehensive plan by right, yes, the way it's
Well,
zoned.
of course, it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Well, that's for you guys to deliberate on.
Pardon?
That's for you guys to deliberate and make a recommendation to council on.
Well, it's simply not consistent with the comprehensive plan now. So if it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan, but it is consistent with zoning, is there an ability to deny the map?
So you're not approving or denying, remember, you're
Well,
just making a
recommend,
recommendation.
yes, it is, would the city council have an opportunity to deny the map?
The city council would have to make significant and substantial findings to deny with regards to the inconsistency with the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
Tom, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Is it the context areas that you see the inconsistency with the comp plan as far as CA4 versus industrial in the northern part of the property?
Well, industrial is inconsistent with
So
residential.
you're speaking specifically. It's a plan.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
I had a couple questions and or comments, perhaps. One was I noticed on the sample statement that would go out to potential buyers about the that they may be inconvenienced by the noise. I think it'd be a safe bet. I don't know if it would make a huge difference one way or the other, but could that be something to consider where it says you will be inconvenienced by the noise, not that you may be inconvenienced by the noise?
So the language on the plat, it's provided in here as a condition, but that the specific language for the plat, of course, could be addressed at a later date to be.
That would not be a thing to address now, to say we would like to see it that way.
You can
Okay,
make a
I'm just curious.
recommendation that you would like the condition to read X. You certainly may.
Gotcha. And then the other question I had, and I don't, it was just to the north side of the cul-de-sac, when zoned industrial, but not certain what might go in there. I was curious how detrimental it would be if, as there is a proposed or a potential condition of a pedestrian pathway to Boyer, what if there was also a right of way that may be voided at some point in the future, but so that if it was appropriate, there could also be a pedestrian path going to the north, depending upon what kind of development goes in there in the future. And maybe that would be vacated if it's totally unnecessary, but it could be there. Thoughts?
My initial thought is if that's destined to be an industrial development, I don't know the value of a pedestrian connectivity to an industrial park. But I guess that's my response to that.
Valid.
I personally am in favor of the pedestrian connectivity to Boyer. I understand what Cliff said about people liking their cul-de-sacs and the sense of security that a cul-de-sac provides, but a big part of our vision for development at Sandpoint is to put pedestrians and bicyclists first. And Jeremy highlighted the proximity of this development to all the great multi-use pathways in Sandpoint and access to, the means of getting around for pedestrians and cyclists. And I think having that 10-foot paved pathway, while it does present an opening to the development, I think that's a good thing. I think connecting these developments to the rest of Sandpoint, if we can't do it with a road, which of course would be my preference on the north end of the development, let's at least give pedestrians who live at the end of that cul-de-sac the opportunity to get out to the Popsicle Bridge or out to the new KLT property on University Place a little bit quicker. Or if they're heading north to any future parks, or they want to ride their bikes to Ponderay or to the new park at the Cedars on Sand Creek, that would provide a quicker and easier access to the amenities to the north of this development as well. So that is something I am in favor of including in the conditions. Other comments or questions from commissioners?
Question for staff. We've had several, probably a better word, of these developments coming through that don't meet the minimum threshold for more detailed traffic studies. At what point would there be a change in operating procedures that might make us look more thoroughly at the cumulative effect rather than each one separately?
Good question. We recently updated our entire transportation model. That's part of the plan. And it's our intent moving forward to not do that every 15 years, but rather look at that more frequently. And same token, we are also revisiting our transportation parameters and guidelines, dealing with all the things we're talking about right now. So we are intending to move that forward and bring that this fiscal year, completion this fiscal year. Adoption date. So we are looking at that, and I think by staying more current in our transportation model, I think we will head off the concern of the cumulative effect capture.
One thing I'd add to, and that's when you were talking about an L-shaped road through there. Well, if there was an L-shaped road through there, that would be the shortcut for everybody that's coming. They would go through that neighborhood even when they don't need to go through that neighborhood. I would see that problematic. That's why I think in this case, again, city has said that cul-de-sac may be more appropriate when it's surrounded by industrial.
Are there any thoughts from commissioners on the proposed condition with regards to the non-vinyl fence being a condition? Do we desire to clarify what that barrier between these dual frontage lots and Boyer is beyond just a non-vinyl fence? I find that rather vague. That could be some other manufactured type material. 7 feet tall, I think, is what's allowed. Personally, one of my concerns with, and I think if Commissioner Huisman were here, she'd probably share this, is this idea. Yeah, the idea of our Boyer corridor becoming a canyon of walls that eliminate the view sheds. And I know driving north on Boyer, I still enjoy the views of Mickinick and Baldy Mountain and Schweitzer. And if there's some way we could put language in that allows for the maintenance of the view sheds that we all enjoy in our city. I'm already concerned about what's going to go up on the east side of Boyer as far as the 2,000-foot block. But in this case, Darren did leave the opportunity open for us to deliberate and discuss what we require in terms of, or what we request in terms of a fence or a 10-foot landscaped buffer of some sort. I would like to just hear commissioners' thoughts on that before we put forward a motion to approve or deny this. And perhaps if Darren is still on the call, we could ask him any questions that we might have.
I don't know what the options are. I know driving that road today and looking at what's across the street from it, and it's a wooden fence that's, staggered so that, and that actually was quite attractive. But again, I don't know if a berm's intended or and what that would look like. There's nothing along that road right now that has berms, is it?
No, just parallel to the railroad tracks.
I know.
The fence dynamic, I've always thought should be up to the homeowner, but with language like this that requires a non-vinyl, I would like to see some more creativity, not only for the city of Sandpoint, but for the passers, the people that are passing by it, the view sight lines, if any, to that. So I kind of don't really like the idea of one 7-foot high fence with a 10-foot break in it halfway through the production.
Mhm.
So guess I'm in agreement that there should be some choices possibly for the homeowners, or let them do it themselves. I know my fence is different than my neighbor's fence.
I think what we can do is include language in a condition that clarifies what's not allowed, perhaps. Vinyl fences are not allowed.
Right.
So I agree with you, though. A 7-foot impermeable fence of any material is undesirable from a community standpoint. Impermeable may not
We
be the right
definitely
word.
need more precise language to what that is, because a vinyl fence could be a 3-foot tall picket fence that would look, that's what I have at my house, 3-foot tall picket fence. It's vinyl though, but it provides no visual barriers, but.
And again, staff's language was, commission should consider requiring the creation of a common lot and or screening in the form of landscaping and or fencing. That leaves a lot of options.
Yeah.
So.
And if that were the case, that would mean that it would be a consistent fence all along Boyer. Is
Or
that
landscaping.
Or landscaping, or berm.
Or screening.
But landscaping wouldn't prevent a fence from being put there once the homeowner bought.
Right.
They could still do it, so then you have both.
Right.
You
That's
want that.
that's true, yeah.
But I know it had come up before that a fence is actually more desirable, if you will, than a landscape from a light. Well, as long as we don't mandate it, I guess we're okay. Being that we didn't want the kids in their backyards chasing balls into Boyer.
Yeah,
Then a fence would prevent that anyway.
sure. And that has to, safety has to be a
But as
consideration
long as we
too.
didn't mandate it, then it's their option to do it. But
I don't know if you can look to the developer for suggestions like that.
I think not at this stage in the hearing.
Don't think so.
Well, this feels a little bit like micromanaging to me. I mean,
Yeah.
the horse is already out of the barn on Boyer. I mean, there's every kind of fence imaginable, some in various states of disrepair. Some of them look pretty good. You know, I'm not necessarily convinced the nice shiny new vinyl fence is any worse than a beat up weathered old wooden fence that half the planks are out of. You know, I think to some degree we need to rely upon the homeowners to keep their subdivision looking decent.
I think that we have a tendency to stray when it comes to our concerns about the community.
Are there any other comments or questions for staff from the commission? Would anybody like, yes, John?
oh, I guess the only thing I would say
Go
is that if we don't think it's in our purvey to look into this issue of what that fence barrier landscaping thing is with any more detail, then we should entertain a motion one way or the other to proceed. If we do think more detail on our part is needed there, then I would think a motion to delay decision. And I would defer to the rest of the commissioners on that one. I don't.
Yeah.
Just for clarification, Mr. Chairman,
Thank you.
I would like to point the commission to condition I, which is the condition regarding the fence that says the developer shall
Okay.
construct a contiguous non-vinyl fence. So the responsibility under these conditions is upon the developer to install and to put the fence in, and then that passes on to the homeowners once the parcels sell. So I just want you to be clear that that's what the condition says. It's not leaving the fence to the individual homeowners after the parcel sell. It's a responsibility of the developer to put the fence in and then pass that responsibility to the parcel owners.
And that'd be along Boyer, not between lots, right?
Right.
Yes, it says fence or wall facing North Boyer Avenue on lots 1 through 10 of block 1.
Gotcha. Yep, that's what I thought.
Thank
Do
you.
we have
for-
to choose one or the other, fence or wall?
No, you would be, no, thank you. You knew the answer.
Thank you for pointing out that language, Fonda. That's
Yeah.
a good reminder. Okay, I don't hear much motivation for changing that language, so
Number B.
I would entertain a motion from anybody who's willing to put one forth. Okay, I'll put one forth. All right,
Are you looking for a motion on the entire project?
yes, I think if there's no more deliberation, we might as well. Yeah. All right, I would move the Planning and Zoning Commission, after consideration of the criteria and relevant standards of Idaho Code and Sandpoint City Code, recommend that Sandpoint City Council approve the request by Big Creek Land Company LLC for the Boyer Meadows 21 lot subdivision on one parcel totaling approximately 8.52 acres, bounded by private property to the north, private property to the east, East Mountain View Drive to the south, and North Boyer Avenue to the east, subject to the following conditions. All the conditions A through Y within section 6 of the staff report provided. Yeah, those are the conditions I agree with, and that's what I'd suggest. Based on evidence, records, and testimony, the reasons for approving this request are: 1, staff has followed the notice procedures applicable to subdivisions contained in Sandpoint City Code Title 9, Chapter 9. And 2, based on information presented at the hearing and the placement of limitations through conditions, the application is in compliance with the subdivision and zoning requirements in Sandpoint City Code per the following justifications. And the proposed subdivision is consistent with the overall planning goals and objectives outlined in the comprehensive plan. It seems to adhere to the urban area transportation plan, and the development is going to provide some much needed housing in Sandpoint. So that's my motion.
I will second that.
Okay. I think we'll do a roll call. Melissa?
Commissioner Riggs,
No.
Commissioner Shook,
Yes.
Commissioner Camp,
Yes.
Commissioner Hastings,
Yes.
Commissioner Walker.
Yes. Okay. So we have a motion accepted and the motion passes. So with nothing else on the agenda tonight, we will adjourn. The meeting is now adjourned at 6:55 PM.